Hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Lawyers. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com. Today we want to talk about school bus safety. Every day, thousands of parents put their children on school buses with the understanding, with the trust that they're going to be safe. Unfortunately, sometimes accidents happen. Just this week, there was a crash between a school bus and a garbage truck in Aurora, Indiana. And that brings me to our guest we have invited today. She is Betsy Greene, an experienced trial attorney with the law firm of Greene & Schultz with offices in Bloomington and Indianapolis, Indiana. And we're going to ask Betsy to shed some light on who's responsible in these kind of accidents, what safety features are or are not in place, and what parents can do to make sure their children are safe when they put them on a school bus. Betsy, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Hi, Rob.
What can you tell me about this accident that happened just the other day in Aurora? What do you know about that?
Well, this accident happened in southern Indiana, which we call the tri-state area, on State Road 350. And what happened was a fully loaded school bus was on the way to school to drop off the children when essentially it drove into the back of a Rumpke garbage truck that was parked on the side of the road. Interesting, the driver of the garbage truck was not in the truck at the time that the collision happened.
Now, there were injuries, I think 21 injured, but nobody too seriously, correct?
Fortunately, none of these injuries were life-threatening. I checked on the news this morning and actually just checked before we got online to have this interview.
Right.
And one of the injuries was considered serious, but not life-threatening. Most of the kids that were taken to the hospital were treated and released. So that's all really good news for this time.
What laws are in place to help keep kids safe on school buses? Are there specific laws for that sort of thing?
There are a lot of laws that are specific to school buses, but also just the general traffic laws apply to the drivers of school buses, just as they apply to the drivers of semi-tractor trucks, garbage trucks, or any other passenger vehicle. So not only do we have the regular rules of the road, if you will, that apply, but there are some special circumstances having to do with school buses. We know a lot about this in Indiana because we had a tragic school bus accident in northern Indiana several weeks ago. And this has to do with motorists not paying attention to school buses. Now, that's not what happened in the wreck in Aurora, but in northern Indiana, I think a lot of people from this area know a family of young children were killed because a young driver disregarded the sign and the blinking light that would require them to stop, went around the school bus and killed 3 children. That's a huge issue. I think it's a huge issue in Indiana, and it's a huge issue nationwide. People cannot do this. So there are special laws in, I believe, every state to prevent people from driving around school buses when the arm with the red stoplight is extended. So that's a really good example of a school bus specific rule.
What about for the safety of the children on the bus? I know there was talk, I was talking to somebody about this specific story, and they said, well, weren't they wearing seatbelts? But I remember when I was a kid, we didn't have seatbelts on school buses.
Rob, you remember well. This has long been an issue here in Indiana, and I think it probably differs from state to state. I can tell you that under the current state of the law, it is not likely there were even seatbelts on that bus because they're not required. Now, for many years, seatbelts were not required on school buses at all. And you can imagine this topic came up in the legislature, but it was always an issue of cost.
Right.
How much it would cost the manufacturers of the school buses or the purchasers, the school districts, to outfit these buses with seatbelts. So in Indiana, a few years ago, they did require that preschool children, at least, had to be transported in buses with seatbelts. However, seatbelts are not required. Now, the good news in other circumstances, the good news is, though, that there's actually a bill pending here in Indiana in the legislature this year to require seat belts on all school buses, at least going forward. Okay. New school buses that are manufactured now. Well, so if you're a concerned parent, my kids are out of college, or one's in college and one's out, so I'm not worrying about school buses anymore necessarily. Mm-hmm. But if you have young children and you are concerned, one thing you can do as a parent is to find out who your legislator is, or in your particular state, make sure you know what the laws are. And if seatbelts aren't required, make sure your lawmakers know that they should be. Because seatbelts, we know, keep people safe. And in a big bus like that, little children can be thrown. So yes, seatbelts is a key factor, and we're getting there.
Now, what about liability in these sort of cases? Who's liable? Is it the driver? Is it the school district? Is there enough to go around to everybody? How's that usually work out?
Well, let's back up. So let's assume, the regular rules of fault apply. So the first question is going to be, well, who's at fault? And then the insurer for the company that's at fault will adjust the claims and work with the lawyers and the victims.
Right.
If it is the bus driver that's at fault, which I don't know what happened today. Right. Yesterday. The state police are still investigating. They have not released their crash reconstruction report, but it looks like for some reason the bus driver did not see this huge garbage truck with its lights on and essentially drove into the back of it. So that's a situation where, assuming, and I don't know, but assuming it occurred as it appears, that would be a situation where the driver could be found at fault for failing to keep a proper lookout and for failing to keep the people on the bus safe. So then, okay, who's responsible?
Right.
If the driver is an employee of the school corporation, then yes, the school corporation is liable for the acts of its employees in the scope of their work, or course and scope of their employment as drivers. Now, I don't know how it is in every school district, but we also have independent bus drivers. We used to call them owner drivers. And so in that circumstance, those are independent contractors. And the school district would not be liable for the actions of an independent contractor. However, there's very strict rules about who can and can't be a bus driver. Typically, one of the requirements is to have substantial insurance coverage in place in case of some sort of tragedy.
Right. I would assume there's also special training for school bus drivers. You can't just go, well, I know how to drive, I can be a school bus driver.
Well, let's hope. I'm sorry, I was being a little facetious,
right.
But I know that there is training required in every school district where I have been involved in my area in Indiana. Absolutely, there is training required. And there should be. And that's another way parents can try to keep their kids safe, by inquiring about their school's policies with regard to bus driver training.
We hope it never happens, but if a parent does have a child who's involved in an accident like this, what should they do? What sort of steps should they take?
Well, I hope it never happens to any parent. But obviously, the first step is make sure your child is being taken care of. Seek the appropriate medical treatment. Do get your child checked out. Sometimes younger children, it's harder for them to put words to how they're feeling. So it is important. Make sure your child gets the appropriate medical attention. Do get your child checked out. And consult an experienced lawyer in this field to find out what your options are with regard to medical bills and injuries.
Great. Well, thank you, Betsy. I appreciate your time today. Thank goodness there weren't the injuries in this one particular accident in Aurora weren't any worse than they were, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Rob.
My guest has been Betsy Greene of the Greene & Schultz Law Firm with offices in Bloomington and Indianapolis, Indiana. And that's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyers. Please take a second to click on the button at the bottom of the screen and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. And if you want more information or you want to find a lawyer, choose a lawyer that lawyers choose at askthelawyer.com. I'm Rob Rosenthal.